What's up, guys? This is Heiss. Today we're at the Colorado Railroad Museum, and earlier this week I posted a video of Rio Grande Southern number 20 chasing the number 7 around the loop, and all I titled it was "It Chases a Goose." And I forgot that a large number of the viewers of the channel are not quite as Colorado narrow gauge obsessed as myself and my buddies that I talk with day in and day out. And so this looked like a totally strange contraption to some of you guys. And it really kind of is. And they're actually really neat machines with a really neat history. Definitely worth talking about. So if BNSF will let me, I figured we'd talk you through the geese a little bit. So the galloping geese started life as cars. Some of them were limousines, like this one, Pierce Arrow limousine. I think one or two of them were originally made out of a Buick, but all older cars that they then turned into rail vehicles. And the purpose of turning them into rail vehicles was that the railroad came on hard times in the 1930s and had some hard territory to run through. And the RGS, Rio Grande Southern, was never really known for having too much of a good financial situation. And so when the Depression hit in the early 1930s, they couldn't really afford to pay a 5-person train crew to operate their trains. Back in the day, you had to have an engineer, fireman, 2 brakemen, and a conductor on the train. And so what they did was they contacted a local outfit to build these, the galloping geese. And so they converted these cars into rail vehicles, or rail buses. And over the years, they've seen a number of different modifications and changes. But it meant that the railroad could run one motorman and continue their mail contract in limited freight service rather than trying to pay 5 guys in a steam locomotive. So they're really neat and really interesting. You can see that this one's got a flanger equipped up front to clear the flangeways when there's snow and ice out. Standard engine under the hood, and it's still a manual transmission car and drives like a car just without a steering wheel. Take a look at that in a minute. They widened the body of the car in the back. You could see where the rear wheel well used to be. And they made a whole new set of frame and trucks back here. And you can see the drive shaft runs to this front truck here, and then it's chain driven to the second axle. And then you can see we have little air brake shoes too. So this thing's got air brakes like it's a train. And back here we have the tourist box, or the freight box that converted into a tourist attraction. You can see that it's lettered for all of the pretty locations on the RGS. Well, when they originally built these, they were built to keep the mail contract and limited freight service alive. But eventually that dried up, and the railroad was quite pretty back in southwestern Colorado. It doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't since the early 50s. But much like the Durango and Silverton was used by the Denver and Rio Grande Western as a tourist outfit, tourist line, the RGS did the same, and they cut holes in the side of their freight boxes and made windows. So you can see we've got the shades drawn right now, but there's actually seats inside, and tourists could ride in the back of these across the RGS towards the later years. And so all this helped try to keep the little railroad that could, keep them running throughout the end of their service there. And so these are really neat machines. The museum's got a number of videos, and there's a couple PBS documentaries, I think, too, where my buddy Jeff, who's pretty much the all-time expert on these, talks through all the history, and he'd get it way better than I ever could. So if you want to learn more about the history, make sure you check those out. I'll try and put some links in the description. But these are neat machines. There were 7 of them, 1 through 7. Number 1 no longer exists. It was kind of parted out so far as I know, and some of it exists under the number 6, which we also have at the museum. But the rest of them are still around. We have the 2, the 6, and the 7 here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. The 3, 4, and 5 also still exist. I believe 3's at Knott's Berry Farm in California, and then the 4 and 5 are around Colorado. And those ones are neat because they actually have a bus body that got put on the front. So they look totally different to this, which still has the original Pierce Arrow body. So Anyway, let me get it opened up and we'll take a look inside. All right. You can see, looks just like an old car. Crank windows and everything. You climb in, you sit in the seat, and then you have no idea what to do with your hands. You have a gas pedal, you have a clutch, you have your shifter. Remember, it's a 4-speed. And then you have your air brake right here. But there's no steering wheel because you can't steer because we're on rails, because we're now a train, despite it looking like an old car in every way and shape and form. You can see that we're going really fast right now, which is, you know, speed records. Only setting speed records on the good old SD&S, right? But it's nice and cozy and nice and trimmed out on the inside here. So it's a really, really neat locomotive, sort of, kind of thing. Motor car, I believe, is the technical term, but they're really, really, really neat machines. I've actually only run 7 once myself, and I only drove it back and forth, and it is just the weirdest thing. You shift into gear, deal with the clutch, and you feel like you're driving a stick shift car, like it's like driving the GTO almost. You put it in reverse, go to drive, and then you still don't know what to do with your hands. It's just totally bizarre in that way. But it's a really, really, really neat part of Colorado history, and something that's really not necessarily unique to Colorado narrow gauge. There were other motor cars and rail buses out there throughout history on different railroads, like the East Broad Top, and I believe the Tweetsie had 1 or 2. But the geese, and the way that the geese look, are kind of uniquely Colorado, and they're really, really neat machines. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this little look at the inside of the Goose and what the Goose is all about. And maybe next time we'll talk about that giant thing. Let me know down below if you'd like to see that. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch y'all next time.